as low as -10 or lower. And for much of the UK, it's a widespread frost and some freezing fog patches to wake up to as well. That fog will be slow to clear, poor visibility in 1 or 2 spots continuing into the afternoon. Also, those icy patches to watch out for early on Saturday in the west and the north. A cold day to come for all of us, 1 to 3 Celsius typically, and below freezing where we've got the fog persisting and where we've got any higher parts. Now, into Saturday night, the fog and the frost will widely reform, and so another very cold night. There'll be an increased risk of some showers feeding into southeast Scotland, perhaps a covering inland here, some significant snow over the hills, and certainly in the north and the west there continues to be that risk of icy patches as we start off Sunday. Some dense freezing fog patches, especially for southern and central parts of the UK. Most of these will disperse by the afternoon, but some will continue. And then a signal for some more significant snow, perhaps to affect southeast England. Some uncertainty about that aspect of the forecast. But if it comes off, of course, it could bring some significant disruption.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m,
where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into the things that have got you talking. And I'll tell you, I'm very happy. Yes. Why? Well, because tonight I'm happy to declare it's an H&M free zone. No Harry, no Meghan. I asked some of you guys on Twitter today, how interested are you in this whole Netflix thing? I pondered, do you want me to get into that on the show tonight or not? I'm happy to report that almost 80% of you said you're not interested at all. I breathed a massive sigh of relief and instead decided to focus on the following topics for tonight. Strikes. How could I not? I'm joined again by a trade unionist this evening. I want to get into where are we now? Because last week, all of you guys pretty much were on the side of the strikers. Are you still a week on? I want your thoughts on that. And who should cover, by the way, for some of these people? Should it be the army or not? And the police, where do you stand on this? Get this. A police force have tweeted out now to ask parents to stop telling children that if you're naughty, the police will come and get you. Apparently that's not the reputation that the police want to have. They want to be more one of us, more accessible, more approachable. Is that where they're going wrong though? Should we fear the police, or is that just an old-fashioned view? And I don't know about you, but I can't help but notice now that wherever I seem to be going, restaurants, bars, whatever, I see more and more of those signs popping up. Cash-free zone, no cash, card only. And we all seem to have just kind of shrugged and gone, OK, no problem. But should we have done? Is it OK, actually, that people can say no to receiving our money? It's legal to do so, but should it be? I want your thoughts on all of that. But first, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. A child with a suspected case of Strep A has died in Sussex, bringing the total number of deaths in the UK during the recent outbreak to 16. The UK Health Security Agency confirmed the child was a student at Hove Park School. It says it's working with Brighton and Hove City Council, as well as the school, to raise awareness of the signs and symptoms. Thousands of Royal Mail staff have walked off the job in a new wave of strikes. More than 115,000 workers rallied outside Parliament, demanding better pay and conditions. Members of the Communication Workers Union will strike again on Sunday, with further action planned throughout the month, including Christmas Eve. The Prime Minister says the government's looking at tough new laws to help minimise disruption.
The government is always going to try and act fairly and reasonably, and that's why we accepted in full the recommendations of the independent bodies that advise the government on the appropriate levels of pay in the public sector. But what I'm not going to do is ask ordinary families up and down the country to pay an extra £1,000 a year to meet the pay demands of the union bosses. That wouldn't be right and it wouldn't be fair. But what I am going to do is ensure that I minimise the disruption to people's lives.
Royal Mail workers at the rally explained why they're taking a stand.
We do our bit and we like that. That's what we do. We are Royal Mail. So we're here to protect our jobs.
If we don't stand today and fight that destruction of Royal Mail, not only will we not have a job, but the public won't have a service.
It's a question of whose side are you on? Are you on the union side or are you on the disgusting Tory side? There's no middle way today, and this crowd is telling us that.
Meanwhile, thousands of soldiers are preparing to cover for other public sector workers striking this Christmas. Troops are already training at some British ports and airports. Border Force staff at Gatwick, Heathrow and Manchester, among others, are due to strike for 8 days from December the 23rd through to New Year's Eve. The Chancellor has announced plans to overhaul the financial sector, pledging to review and replace hundreds of pages of EU regulations. Dubbed the Edinburgh Reforms, Jeremy Hunt says Brexit has provided a golden opportunity to reshape the rules. More than 30 regulatory changes have been unveiled, including reversing some measures introduced following the 2008 financial crash.
Banks have become much healthier financially since 2008. We put in place a process so that financial issues can be resolved, which we didn't have before. But on that basis, we also want to make sure they can compete with other financial centres, whether it's the United States or Asia. And Scotland is in a fantastic place to do that, and that's why these reforms will make a big difference.
A serving Met police officer has appeared in court charged with raping 2 women 11 days apart. PC Rupert Edwards is accused of committing the crimes while off duty in South London and in Epsom in Surrey. He was arrested in September and subsequently suspended. He's due to reappear in court next month. A fuel poverty charity is warning the rising cost of living and cold weather will leave millions struggling this winter. National Energy Action says people are facing a choice of either living in unheated homes or racking up debt. It comes as the UK Health Security Agency has issued a cold weather alert for England, with temperatures predicted to drop to as low as -10. The Met Office is warning up to 4 inches of snow could fall in London and the South East this weekend. The Prime Minister has been at the launch of a new generation fighter jet in Lincolnshire. Britain will work with Italy and Japan to develop Tempest, designed to replace the Typhoon and expected to take to the skies by 2035. Rishi Sunak says the joint venture aims to create thousands of UK jobs and strengthen security ties. The King and Queen Consort have visited Wrexham AFC. The royal couple were there to meet Hollywood stars and co-owners Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. They also spoke to players and other members of staff during a tour of the stadium. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Tatiana. I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock this evening. And Dee says, thank goodness, Michelle, your programme is an H&M free zone. She says, thank you, in capital letters. Fed up with the whole debacle, she says. I've got to say, I kind of agree with you. Chris, you take it a step further. You're saying, thank God you're not talking about all that. I've just cancelled my Netflix because of it all. Really? That's a bit extreme. How are you going to watch all your documentaries on, I don't know, like Mass Murderers or whatever it is, without Netflix? Anyway, that's enough of them too. Won't be discussing it anymore. Except, though, there is a fly in the ointment because I say I'm not discussing it, but look who's alongside me. None other than Prince Harry lookalike himself. The firefighter and trade unionist Paul Embry. Works quite well, didn't it, having you tonight?
I just say I've been teaching my wife to do a very deep curtsy all day long and she hasn't quite got it yet.
Do you ever make money from Prince Harry lookalike gigs?
Well, I thought I might have done, but then when he swanned off to America, I thought that was the end of any potential doppelganger career for me. So now I'm stuck coming in on your show.
It's available. It's there for all good gigs. What is it? Weddings, anything, quite frankly. All of them.
You name it.
Yeah, he's there. He's with us. Alongside him, we've got the former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. And you know the drill. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. That's all right. That's all right. I mean, we've got things to talk about.
Yes, you've never done my show before. Welcome. Good evening. Thank you. And you guys know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three here. It's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? I want to talk to you about striking. Where do you stand on it? If you're on Twitter, I've got a Twitter poll running, by the way, where I'm asking you, do you still back the strikers? I know last week when we had this topic of conversation, you did. Are you still in that same position? Get in touch. That poll running for about another half an hour or so. You can also tweet me as well on GB News, at GB News. Did I give you that email address, gbviews@gbnews.uk? So strikes, I want to talk to you about cashlessness as well. Are you cool with the fact that actually so many places now just have signs in the windows saying no cash? I think it's very odd. I don't tend to use cash, but that's not the point. Many people do. Where do you stand on it? And the police, do you think they should be one of us? Or should there be a bit of separation? Should there even be perhaps a level of fear when you think of the police? If you see someone coming around the corner, should you go, oh, best behave myself, it's a policeman? Or is that just kind of yesterday's attitude? Give me all your thoughts again at GB News on the email. Deirdre says, Michelle, you look like the Statue of Liberty tonight. Michael says, are you heading off to the Panto afterwards? Are you performing? I think you're referring to my wonderful headband. You guys need to move with the fashions. It's the height of fashion. It's a pearl headband. No.
Pantomime dame, obviously, Michelle.
Yes, I was just about to say one of the ugly sisters, but I don't really think I'm complimenting myself there. But no, I'm not in a panto. I'm just a fashion icon. What can I say? Right, top story, strikers then. Over 100,000 postal workers have been on strike today here in London. This is the first of many days' action, by the way, between now and in the run-up to Christmas. It's not just posties, by the way. Pretty much every single industry now, isn't it? Everything, border force, ambulances, trainers, nurses, you name it. I mean, it's probably easier to list the people that are not striking than to list all of the ones that are. I'm very blessed to have a trade unionist, proud trade unionist next to me. But before I come to you, Paul, I'm going to start with you, Henry. Are you on the side of the strikers? Where are you on all this?
Well, I'm going to give you a complicated answer. You know, I've thought for a very long time that some of the public service workers, and I'm including police, I'm talking fire service, I'm talking ambulance crews and so on, are distinctly underpaid. And I felt that the government, successive governments, in fact, over many decades, have rather taken advantage of the ethos of serving the public to not keep wages down, but not expend more than they need to on paying such people. And I think that's wrong. However, at the moment, we've got a problem with inflation. It's causing everybody's cost of living to go up, whilst salaries remain the same. Now, historically, in the main, inflation goes up when people have got excess money in their pockets and they're spending it. And so the retailers charge more, driving inflation. And so one of the ways that traditionally you can control that is by keeping wages down or taxing people more. Now, it doesn't work in these circumstances because it's not pounds in the pocket that have driven inflation, it's external pressures. That's why inflation in 14 EU member states is actually higher than it is in the UK. It's not just about UK policy or Brexit or anything like that. These are global trends and European sort of regional trends such as the Ukraine war. And so if we actually start paying people, as some are asking for, I don't think your union is but 17%.
And higher, some asking for higher.
Indeed. Then we are going to drive inflation higher. But so it's a sort of nuanced approach I've got. I'm not sitting on the fence on this. I think it is wrong that the government does not pay, and we'll come on to the military in a minute, and I've got something to say about that, but does not pay public sector staff enough, and haven't for a long time. But I think we've also got to be reasonable about expectations. The other thing I'd say is this is all over Christmas. I had plans for Christmas which are now wrecked to see family that I haven't seen for years. They're wrecked. Well, because they're in Europe. OK, and I can't. I'm not going to be able to see them as planned, and we're trying to figure out what to do now. The thing is that the unions, I can see why they've done it. They think that they're going to apply pressure on the public. The public are going to demand the government moves on this. But actually, I think the unions are losing sympathy by striking at this time. It's people who are already suffering who are going to suffer because of rail strikes. I lost a contract the other day because I couldn't get a train because they were striking. So there are numerous people who are having problems as a result of strikes. And I think it's unfair, it's selfish, and I do believe that some unions are driven by politics as well as being a voice for their members. So, I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong anyway, but I think it's wrong at this time of year particularly.
Well, Ambrose?
Well, you just have to look at the economic circumstances that we're in. These disputes have not come out of a clear blue sky. And I would disagree that this is being driven by politics. It's being driven precisely by the economic situation and the fact that many people are being told once again that they have to accept a real terms pay cut. The pressure that that's going to put on their finances, many people reaching crisis point, not being able to afford their mortgages, not being able to pay their energy bills, worrying about whether or not they can buy their kids Christmas presents. So, you know, I think the idea that people have just, all these millions of workers who are taking strike action have just decided because they don't like the Tories that they're going to do something about it. They're going to attack the Tories. They're going to try and bring down the Tory government. It's just not a realistic assessment of the situation. And I think the problem of what Henry says is, look, we're about to enter a long and deep recession. Now, in terms of wage increases potentially driving inflation, even if that is true, the danger of not paying people, the danger of not putting a decent amount of money in people's pockets is that you're going to make that recession even longer and even deeper.
But why don't we make the demands reasonable rather than 17+%?
Well, I mean, all unions, Henry, have a bargaining position. All unions will go...
But it's difficult when you're a railway train driver and people see that you're earning £59,000 on average, which is about the European average as well, if you look at German and French and Spanish and so on drivers.
But train drivers are a very, very small number of the people involved in...
But it's highly disruptive.
In terms of the RMT, the union that represents the majority of train drivers, or ASLEF, actually, the RMT represents other rail workers, people working on the track, for example, people working in the stations, clippers, and so on and so forth. And some of these people are not paid particularly well. But going back to the point, I would say that, you know, a temporary increase in inflation, even if that were to occur as a result of giving people decent wage increases, would be much the lesser of the two evils compared to a longer and deeper recession, which is what could happen if we don't keep demand up, if we don't keep investment up, if we don't give people decent pay increases. And then when we enter that recession, the downward spiral we then get into with layoffs and factories and businesses closing and unemployment benefits having to go up and unemployment queues getting longer, that becomes a much more deeply embedded problem.
I agree,
for this country's economy.
But Paul, I'm not saying we don't. I'm not saying that shouldn't be a pay increase. What I'm saying is that for people to have their lives disrupted over Christmas, for pay increases that are or requests, even if they're negotiating positions, that are so high when some of the people asking for such increases are already earning close to £60,000 a year, is very difficult for the public to swallow, because a lot of people are not part of unions. A lot of people are earning a great deal less and are struggling a great deal more than some of the people in the unions that are striking. So it just presents very, very badly.
Those are exceptions, I think. I mean, certainly some unions have tabled above inflation pay demands. But as I said, look, I was a long-time union negotiator. Of course, you go in with a particular demand, knowing full well there's every chance you're going to be negotiated down from that. Just as an employer would do the opposite, would go in with the lowest offer.
Indeed, I've negotiated other things. And, of course, your start position is not necessarily your end position.
Yeah, you're going to be forced to increase that offer. And, you know, I'm pretty sure that unions at the moment are inside those negotiations, are prepared to be flexible, are prepared to compromise. And in fact, I suspect some unions would actually settle for a lower than inflation pay increase if they could get something better than the 4%, the 5% that have been...
I mean, a serious question here is the negotiating, because I understand both sides of this, but is the negotiating mechanism flawed? Is it broken? Because, you know, you get some of the rail unions, Mick Lynch, for example, saying, well, the government should get involved, and the government saying, well, hang on, it's the train operator's responsibility. And, you know, it's kind of, nobody's taking responsibility for this. And that's one particular union. But is the mechanism for negotiating these things flawed? Is it broken? Is it fit for purpose?
I don't think the mechanism itself is necessarily broken. I think it's got the capacity to be able to deliver decent pay increases. But I do think there's an argument to say that if you get to a point where there's an impasse between unions and employers within a particular industry that is so critical to the functioning of the country, then there's an argument to say that the government at some point has to step in. Now, I don't think the government should step in on the basis of we're going to outlaw these strikes, we're going to crush the unions, that kind of thing. I think the government should step in on the basis of, OK, we need to assess the situation. Are some of these demands reasonable? Do we need to make sure people get a decent pay increase in this industry? If we do believe that, then we've got to try to facilitate that. Now, I think there's probably been a shift, actually, in the government's stance with the rail industry over the last few weeks. I think they took a very a very obstructive approach originally, and I think they've softened with the realisation that the RMT are not going anywhere. The RMT are solid, and these strikes will continue.
Well, the other thing, I mean, I would say to the unions, if your intentions are purely and only to support the welfare of your staff, fair enough. But if you have the slightest bit of what you're doing motivated by politics, and I do personally believe that some of the unions are motivated, or union leaders are motivated partly by politics. I think Mick Lynch is one. Then I think they need to stop, because they're not doing themselves, the country, or anybody any good. If they want to fight politics, become a politician, not a union leader.
Do you think some of it's motivated by politics, Paul?
Well, look, union leaders are political by definition. Of course they are. I was a senior union official. I'm political by definition. But we need to remember, how do we get to a point where thousands of workers in a particular industry, members of a particular union, take strike action? They don't do it because a union... They might have done it in the 70s because a union leader clicked his fingers and said, right, everybody out. That's not what happens now. Now, there are a number of hoops that a union would have to jump through. I mean, we have some of the most restrictive restrictive trade union laws in Western Europe, by the way. And union leaders don't just order people out, they have to ballot them. So the people who are taking this action are not the union leaders, it's the members who have voted for it. We shouldn't forget that.
Yeah, I do find it always fascinating that everyone denies just how political unions are. But of course, lest we forget that many of the unions fund or make large donations to the opposition, which I always find quite interesting if you then want to sit there and say you're not political. Anyway, I want to take a quick break. My inbox is literally on fire with you guys referencing some of the stuff that's been going on and your thoughts. So what I'm going to do, take a quick break now, and I'm going to return to this topic. There's a lot for me to get into. I want to ask you about whether or not you think that the laws around striking should be tougher. I want to ask about the military as well. Do you reckon the military should be expected to step up into some of these void areas, especially over Christmas? What do you think about that? Get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. Clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock this evening. Alongside me, the firefighter and trade unionist Paul Embury and the former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. Now, just before the break, we were talking about strikes. The two gents either side of me with some strong opinions there, and lots of you guys getting involved in the conversation. Herm Lawrence says, Michelle, Everybody seems to be so concerned about the people striking and their wages, but what about all of the people affected by their action? He references businesses such as restaurants, bars, etc., that have been absolutely battered during the COVID ridiculous days. And now, when you've got a situation where your customers cannot get to and from you, what about those people? What about their livelihoods, he asks? And I think that is a very good question. I'm asking whether or not you are kind of still backing these strikers. We discussed this last week. Paul was here as well, actually. I've got to say, Vernon says, what I disagree with, Michelle, is what feels, in your words, you're saying, like, the country, people are holding the country to ransom. And I've got to say, this was the point I made last week, and I still feel this week. For me, I share the concerns, frustrations of people being in low wages. I have all the sympathy, and I found what's going on incredibly sad. But there is an edge to this now, the coordination, the coordinated nature, determined, if you will, to try and bring lots of society to a halt. It's something about that that makes me very uncomfortable. As a businesswoman, I understand it. I understand why they're picking now the Christmas period, maximum impact. I get it, but I don't like it. Stuart says, no, I do not support real NHS or post office strikers. Anyone who has worked in the public sector will know that their salaries are enhanced by excellent terms and conditions, including things like pensions way above those in the private sector. Wilter says you should sack all the strikers and make them reapply for their jobs. It might make them think twice before striking. Steve, you're saying that you do feel like this is a politically motivated situation. John, you're a bit harsh. You say all public service workers should be banned from striking as a condition of employment. Someone else is saying, what about the army? Why are they always being brought in? Which leads me nicely to the two next questions I want to put to my panel briefly. I'm going to start with the army. Why should they be expected to step up? And then I want to move into, should it be harder for people to strike? So I'll start with you, Henry. You see Border Force now, about 600 personnel have been drafted in to cover Heathrow and Gatwick, etc., while Border Force go on strike. Should they be?
Well, two things there. Very briefly on Border Force, what most people watching won't know is that Border Force are actually civil servants.
Right.
They think of them probably as sort of a form of police officer on the borders. They're not. They are civil servants. They're part of the civil service pay structure, and at various ranks within the within Border Force, civil servants who've never done a Border Force job before are posted in and posted out back into the sort of what people would consider the sort of mainstream civil service posts again. So that's one thing to consider, and I think Border Force itself needs serious reform in that respect because it also has an operational impact. That aside, yes, as you correctly said in your introduction to the programme, the Army is busy training at the moment, has been for a few weeks now, to step in at certain border posts, including airports. It's great that we can rely on our armed forces, but a private soldier in the Army is earning about £22,000 and is expected sometimes to work 7 days a week, over the weekends, night and day, and can have anything thrown at them. Yes, they have a good life, they learn many things, but essentially what we've got is we've got young men and women who are paid very often a lot less than the staff they're replacing, being thrown into the front line in a situation that they will step up to the plate. I have no doubt. I've commanded troops and I was a private soldier myself at one point. And I have tremendous respect for them, and I believe the nation will always be able to rely on them to keep the services going.
But we have to?
We shouldn't, no. I mean, it should be in extremis. But what I see now is a government almost taking the position, it doesn't matter too much what happens elsewhere because we can always fall back on the armed forces. It feels that way to me. I think it's wrong. We've got the armed forces, the army's being cut. They're not living in good conditions at all. And their life prospects, I mean, we've got...
And soldiers can't strike, can they?
No, soldiers can't strike. They don't have a union.
Do you think they would?
I don't think they would want to be part of a union.
No, you said they're earning about 22 grand a year.
Yeah.
If they could strike, I know that they can't, so I'm playing devil's advocate, but if they could, do you think that they would?
It's a very hypothetical argument. Some might not, and I suspect that's the same with rail workers or firefighters. Some will go on strike because they're going along with it. Some believe passionately in it, and some are opposed to it, I'm sure. It'll be the same with any workforce, and I'm sure it'll be the same in the armed forces. But if you put it to the vote in the armed forces, I am absolutely confident that they would not want to be part of a union. And I don't think they should be. And I don't think the police should be part of the union. And, because... Can you imagine a situation where you need to mobilise to defend the country, and the army says, "No, sorry, we're not doing that"? I mean, that's where you start. You say, "Well, we want more money, we want more overtime." Sorry, but that's not the way a military can function.
So you see unions as a hindrance rather than a help?
No, in the armed forces, with the role that the armed forces have, and I also believe the same as a former police officer as well, I believe that the police should, the Police Federation, which represents the interests of the police, but I think that these services, and sorry, Paul, but I think it's the same with fire and rescue, and I think it's the same with the ambulance staff, but that they should not be permitted to strike. However, if the contract between the government and those organisations, those public services, breaks down because the government is not providing support to them in an appropriate way, then I think that contract is broken, and you end up with the discussion we're having now.
Paul, I've got to say, I don't think firefighters should be able to strike. I think it's a public safety issue, and I do believe that there are certain industries and all the rest of it sectors where it's just too dangerous. Am I wrong?
Well, I think you are, because then the question is, well, where do you draw the line? Because you could make an argument to say that every public service is, to a greater or lesser extent, essential. They're all essential services. I mean, some are classed as emergency services, but all services, whether it's the health service, whether it's the public transport system, they're all essential, aren't they? So if you take that argument and you say now, will you just do it for, say, firefighters and police officers and the army, then I think you then get into a very slippery slope where essentially then you just encompass all public sector workers in that particular category. And, we probably know of some of the regimes in the past that banned strikes in the public sector. There's certainly something that Mussolini did in Italy in the 1930s.
But you've been on strike as a firefighter, haven't you? So just help me understand, because I look at that and I think it's wrong. So help me understand then. So when you decide to go on strike, how much cover is there in your absence to make so that if there is a fire, someone doesn't die?
Well, every fire and rescue authority, and there's around 50 in the UK, give or take a few, is required by law to have a basic contingency service in place in the event that the main service can't function, whether it's through strike action, a pandemic or something like that. So in most, years ago it used to be the Green Goddesses from the army that would come in. Nowadays it's often private companies, or they'll rely on a few senior officers to walk across picket lines. So there is a basic level of service there. But no one's pretending that level of service is anything like the service that's normally provided. But what I would say, Michelle, is never underestimate the anguish that firefighters and other emergency service workers who feel they have to take this action go through before they vote for it.
But then I see people on picket lines.
They never do it lightly.
But then I see people on picket lines with just, I know it's not an emergency service, it was the Royal Mail a second ago. It look like they're having a whale of a time. They've got the drums, they've got the instruments, they're dancing around. They don't look anguished to me. I know that was post workers, by the way, but when I see other picket workers...
And my brother was there today in Parliament Square. There was a big national rally. He's a postal worker and a member of the CWU. And obviously that's not an emergency service, although it is plainly an essential service. But look, I don't think you can blame unions for trying to make... If you're having a big national rally and you're trying to galvanise solidarity and strength of feeling, I don't think you should blame unions for trying to give it a bit of colour and have a good kind of atmosphere.
I think that's fair enough, Paul.
That's a normal part of campaigning.
I think that's fair enough, Paul, and I do get that. I mean, again, presentationally, it might be a bit difficult for people whose lives have been disrupted to see people on the side. Odd. Yeah, it does look a bit odd. But essentially, what there is a difference. There is something
a very quick difference.
That people's lives can be at stake. If the railway isn't working, somebody's life is unlikely to be put at risk. If the fire service isn't working, the ambulance service isn't working, the police aren't working, or the armed forces aren't working, then I think we're talking a degree of risk there to the nation and to individuals that I think is unacceptable and does need looking at. But I do think that those people need proper, robust representation. I've always said that, and I will stand by that.
Final words, Paul.
That's the key point, though, isn't it? You agree, Henry, and I accept that you believe completely that they do deserve proper remuneration and conditions. But if the employer and the government isn't giving it to them, what other option do they have than through their union taking action to fight for it? That's the key point, isn't it?
Well, I shall leave you to ponder that key point that Paul lands in the break, actually. I do need to head to a break. I should have got a couple of minutes ago, actually, but I was enjoying that conversation, so apologies for that. What do you think about the whole army thing that Henry was just touching on? Do you think it's right that the soldiers do get drafted in? Quite frankly, it feels like to any problem that society's got, the army seems to be there to fix it. Is that right, though? When I come back from my break, I want to ask you about cash. Do you carry money with you? I'm not trying to rob you, I'm just intrigued, because so many places now are cash-free. Everywhere, at restaurants, holiday parks. This is look, I claim credit for that picture there. I took it in a shopping centre the other day. We are cashless, they proudly say. Hang on a minute though, that's legal tender in this country. Should you be able to refuse to take it? I don't think so, do you? I'll see you in 2 minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through until 7 o'clock this evening. Lots of you getting in contact about that striking situation. Maggie says, Michelle, if the poorest on benefits in our society have to make do with a 10.1% rise, how could anyone with a straight face think that it's more acceptable for them to demand more if they are not in that situation, especially considering their terms and conditions like pensions? I have to say, on the flip side of this, there are a lot of you that are still absolutely backing the strikers. I am running a Twitter poll at GB News. Give me your thoughts on that. Alongside me, Paul Embry and Henry Bolton keep me company to the end of the show. Right, let's talk cash, shall we? Are you somebody that does still carry cash? If so, have you noticed that you're finding it harder and harder to spend it these days? I'll pick up with you first on this poll. What do you make to the fact that so many organisations seem to be proudly declaring, I took that picture earlier, that they are cashless, that they are cash-free?
I think it's worrying, actually. I think there are still quite a few people in our society who do regularly use cash, who are probably not comfortable about carrying out every transaction digitally. I think, for example, of elderly people. But I think you also need to think of people such as people in abusive or coercive relationships, where they don't necessarily have access to the bank card and only are able to spend cash because they managed, to get a few pounds a week off of the abusive partner or whatever. And if those people can't spend it and don't have access to a bank card, then obviously it's going to affect them in a very big way. I think there are other implications as well. I mean, there was a story recently about the Free Speech Union, which had its accounts shut down by PayPal for no other reason than the Free Speech Union argued for things and defended things that evidently the people in the upper echelons of PayPal didn't like. So that was an ideological example of a big financial company essentially making it impossible for a legitimate organisation to function because it disagreed with its view on stuff. Now, eventually, as we know, that was overturned quite rightly because the Free Speech Union fought back against it. But I do think that has serious implications, that if we are entirely reliant on digital and online banking, bank cards and whatever, then that potentially makes us much more of a conformist society. I think there's other questions such as digital fraud, for example. I think it opens a way for much more digital fraud in society. So I don't like it. I think, frankly, the government should legislate to say that becoming a cashless business or whatever shouldn't be permitted.
I completely agree. I think it should be illegal to refuse cash in this country. Henry, where do you stand on it?
You know, you're not going to get much of an argument here, I'm afraid, because I very much agree with what Paul's just said. There are people in this society who absolutely rely on cash. Now, I think, you know, the way of the world is such that we are in an evolution where eventually, some years from now, probably, sadly, cash will disappear. But that's in the future. And if the right safeguards aren't put in place, I think it's highly risky to go down that route. And what I think we see from the photograph that you posted earlier, and a little while ago, I was in London visiting some people about the Ukraine war, but I was looking to take people for a coffee. There was not one cafe down this street of about a dozen cafes that was taking cash. I was furious. I said, well, that's it. I'm not buying coffee from you. And I think we've got to stand up to it because they are trying to force the issue by saying we're not taking cash. I think that is unlawful already. I'm not a lawyer, but I think it is legal currency. What I have in my pocket, in my wallet, if I've got a £10...
You're able legally not to accept cash.
I was in a kind of bar restaurant place a few months ago with a friend and went to pay the bill at the end with cash. I had sort of 100 quid in my pocket and went to pay with cash. For some reason, I didn't happen to have my bank card on me. And this was after we'd eaten the meal, and they said, oh, no, we don't take cash. There was no...
So what did you do?
Well, fortunately, my friend, it was my cousin, actually, who I was with, had his own bank card and said, look, you know, I'll pay, and I gave him the money. But in that situation, I think it's appalling that...
Well, I would have just said, if I was in that situation...
run off, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I would have just said, well, really sorry, I can't pay for my meal then.
Michelle, a lot of people think that, you know, and I keep getting accused of being privileged and wealthy on Twitter and so on. Far from it. When I lost... to run for the UKIP leadership, I had to give up my job working for the Foreign Office, and they would not re-employ me. And I think there are issues around that, but that's a different conversation. But as a result, when I lost the UKIP leadership, I had no income, none. And my life was left in a very difficult situation as a result. All I had for a couple of months was some cash. That was it. I had nothing in the bank. I had cash. And I couldn't spend it in many places. And there are lots of people out there who are in a similar situation.
Well, Steve
they don't have that access to bank accounts, and they don't have the access to digital banking.
Steve says, Michelle, I really hope you read this out. I own several bars and we take cash as a last resort. The problem is not us, the retailers, it's the banks. Steve says they're charging us for putting cash in the bank and it takes time, etc. The debit card rates are much better than the charge itself. That's the reason. But then, Steve, what I would say is a counter to that. I get that it's cheaper and more convenient to you as a retailer, but surely you must think that you are potentially alienating a set of your consumers. I don't know, maybe it's the elderly or whatever it is.
Should he not be dealing with... isn't that going back to Paul's point about the government stepping in here and saying, you will take cash? It is...
The other point as well, which I think we need to pick up on, there was a story I think it was yesterday, that a quarter of cash tills, ATMs, have closed in the last 4 years, been taken out of operation. That will have a serious impact on people who use cash as well.
Yeah, a few of you are saying, actually, if you go somewhere and it says cash only, cashless, you will take your business elsewhere. Phil says, Michelle, you should come to the Isle of Wight. He says, shops there are saying cash only. Cool, blimey, let's
They did live in the 1950s on the Isle of Wight.
Oh,
I think I might move there.
Phil, look what he's saying about you. I wouldn't stand for that,
They
Phil.
haven't got the internet.
I think it's not a bad thing.
Right, well, there you go. I'm going to go to a quick break. When I come back, I want to know, someone here has just emailed in and said, what I want to know is if you have dinner and then they say they don't accept cash and you've not got your card on, what do you do? But Paul's answer to that, he would get his mate to pay the bill. I wouldn't.
I'd sit there
and say tough. I'd say tough. I'd be out the back washing dishes, so I would. Right, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk to you about the police. What should our relationship be with them? One of respect, or should there be a little edge of fear? Should we fear them even just a little bit? I'll tell you why I'm asking in a couple of minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through until 7 o'clock tonight. A few of you saying, Michelle, you're wrong. Cash is legal tender and businesses cannot refuse legal tender. I thought that too, but that's not the case. You can legally refuse to accept cash as long as you give people another mechanism, i.e. digital or debit cards or whatever, to be able to pay. So it is the case, actually, that people can legally do this. My argument is you shouldn't be able to. Whether you need to change the law to achieve that, I don't know, but I think it's fundamentally wrong that if you've got cold, hard cash in your pocket, that places will, I would say quite proudly these days, refuse to accept it. Anyway, alongside me until 7 o'clock tonight, we've got the firefighter and trade unionist, Paul Embry, and the former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. And you've also just been telling me you're a former police officer as well, aren't you? This is interesting to me because a story caught my eye, ladies and gentlemen, so it did. This was in Dorset, Dorset Police. I don't know if you've got kids. Mine's a little bit too young for this, but when he gets a little bit older, I'll definitely be using this line of warning him that if he messes around too much, you better watch yourself because that policeman there, he might take you away. I think it's a wonderful line. I'll definitely be wheeling it out. But Dorset Police, who heard a mum say this to their child, were not happy, took to social media to ask people to stop telling young kids that the police can take them away. I personally think it's quite ludicrous because there's an element of me, and I know it's not politically correct, Henry, but there's an element of me that I do think actually you should have a little bit of fear when you see the police. You know, if I'm up to no good perhaps and a copper walks around the corner, there is a part of me that should think, oh my God, I better behave. I shouldn't be sitting there thinking, oh, look at him, look at her, what they're going to do, and carry on.
I
Regardless, am I wrong?
Oh, no, I agree entirely. Look, I mean, I don't want people to fear the police unless... I mean, the police service in Northern Ireland at one point gave me a polo shirt. On it said, feared only by the guilty.
Wow.
And I think that's, if you're guilty of a crime, fear the police. And if the police aren't creating that atmosphere, that environment, then they are failing. I think you should fear the police if you are guilty of a crime.
But do you think people do? I don't.
No, I don't think they do. And I think there's a great deal to unpack. I mean, it's probably a whole programme about the breakup of policing and the respect for it. I mean, in the break, we were just talking about how the police training colleges have been disbanded by the Conservative government. And not only did they get rid of 20,000 police officers, which they're recruiting now, but they also closed 600 police stations. They closed custody suites. You know, police officers are working from home and training on online training modules. The whole thing is falling apart. There is no respect. Now, you know, when it comes to parents saying, look, if you're going to misbehave, if you're going to start kicking people's property or kicking that car, you know, as you walk past it, and a police officer sees you, he's going to take you away. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think maybe if you're saying, listen, if you don't go to sleep quickly, I'm going to call the police and the police are going to come and put you in jail.
I think that's use that line. I'd be willing out
well, I think
so
that's
much my kid wouldn't care about it anymore.
As a police officer, I'd be slightly irritated if I got a call to somebody's house saying, look, my child won't go to sleep, will you take him to jail?
I wouldn't really ring
Comes to my house all the time.
Yeah, I wouldn't really ring it. It'd just be an idle threat, but my kid wouldn't know that. Oh, where do you stand?
No, I'm going to vehemently disagree with you, Michelle.
What's the matter with you
look,
all?
let me say, by the way, let me preface my disagreement with you by saying that I completely accept, and I've written, actually, how the police have adopted the woke agenda over recent years. Too much of the woke agenda, dancing on pride parades and all of that kind of stuff, and I've been very critical of them for that sort of thing. But actually, I do have sympathy with Dorset police officers. I don't think we should be saying to kids, just because they're... Of course, if they're breaking the law, then kids should fear the police. But if parents are saying to their kids, look, if you're naughty, if you do this, then the police are going to take you away, then I think actually we're sowing the seeds of a fundamental misunderstanding in children's minds about what the police are actually for. And given that those kids may one day have to call on the police if they're in an emergency situation, if they've been taught to believe the police are baddies, they're going to take you away,
right.
then they may be reluctant about approaching.
You're right, Paul.
I
think you're right, Paul. I think you're right, Paul, because actually, what the police job is not to actually arrest people and charge them and put them forward for prosecution. The police job is to preserve life and property. And that is first and foremost.
Isn't it?
And that is why they have that is why there are laws to give them powers to respond to situations. And sometimes, because there are people in society who are hell-bent on doing harm to life and property, that they have powers of arrest and detention. So, but I do think that there is another side to this, which is putting forward, and the police need to reinforce this, that they are capable of helping people, of preserving life and property. They are there as protectors, but they have powers to act if you cross the line.
The truth is, today's police, I mean, it's so broken, the service, they probably wouldn't turn up anyway, would they?
Well, I've got to say...
I do agree with that.
It'll take about 6 days to get there.
I am monumentally outverted. So I am. Everyone pretty much disagrees with me. Fred says, when I was a cop, I used to hate it if I had kids were scared of us. It's the last thing we want. Louise says, I've got an 18-month-old daughter and I would never be telling her if she's naughty, the police will get her. I don't want her to be afraid of them. I want her to go to them if she's ever lost or needs help. Maggie says... Perhaps, Michelle, what you should be saying is if you're naughty, the police are going to come and make you dance the Macarena. I like that. I hear what you're saying there. But anyway, yeah, OK. On some things I'm outvoted. I've got to say that is one of them. Up next is Lawrence Fox. Lawrence, good evening. Would you ever say that to your kids? Oh, good. You're in the common sense camp with me then.
Always.
Oh, by the way, sorry, before I was excitedly, I'm so into my topic and I want desperately to find someone that agrees with me. I forgot to tell you, I had a Twitter poll running. I was asking you whether or not you support the strikers. Get this, more than 3/4 of you say that you don't support them. Henry and Paul, that's all I've got time for. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lawrence Fox, sorry, I got so excited. I prematurely went over to you. Welcome back again. What have you got on your show tonight?
Thank you, and don't apologise. Tonight we've got the latest Twitter dump, data dump, Mark II. We've got Chris Whitty wanting to stick his nose into your wood burner, and the state of democracy with Eva Fladinga-Brook. I got it right.
I'm very confused. What's my wood burner got to do with Chris Whitty?
You'll find out.
Something?
You'll find out, don't worry.
This is why, ladies and gentlemen, you literally cannot go anywhere. It's 7 o'clock, it's Friday night. Lawrence Fox is up next. Still, many people are writing in about the police situation, about how you definitely... Lawrence agrees with me, so I'll take that. But pretty much everyone else out there, all of the viewing public, think I've lost my marbles, I think, when it comes to that one. Got to be honest. Many of you as well on the cash thing, you're not happy about the cashless situation. I mentioned it earlier on. You said that you will definitely take your business elsewhere. I found one. Liz, my viewer, Liz, she says, I totally agree with you tonight, Michelle. The parents are right to get their kids to respect the police. Many kids do not respect the police or, in fact, even their elders. I think you're right, Liz, although I've got to say, got to concede these two chaps have made me ponder a little bit because if you fear the police and you're a kid and something does go wrong, when you want to turn to the police, if I've put the fear of goodness knows what into you and you see the police, you're probably going to run the opposite way, aren't you? So maybe it might backfire. After all, I'll spend my weekend thinking about it. But for now, that's all I've got time for. Have a fantastic one. Don't go anywhere. Lawrence is up next and I'll see you on Monday.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It stays cold into the weekend. Ice, snow and fog for some, but for many others, clear skies by night and crisp winter sunshine by day. We've still got cold air in place across the UK and we've still got low pressure in the North Sea, helping to maintain some showers. But it's mainly windward coasts where we'll see those showers, so that means that for Friday night it's northern Scotland into parts of Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. The showers at coastal level will be around rain and sleet, perhaps some hail, but inland and with any elevation falling as snow, covering for Snowdonia, for example, for higher parts of Cumbria, and certainly a lot of snow building up for northern Scotland. Now, parts of the northern Scotland where we see some clear spells overnight could dip to as low as -10 or lower. And for much of the UK, it's a widespread frost and some freezing fog patches to wake up to as well. That fog will be slow to clear, poor visibility in one or two spots continuing into the afternoon. Also, those icy patches to watch out for early on Saturday in the west and the north. A cold day to come for all of us, 1 to 3 Celsius typically, and below freezing where we've got the fog persisting and where we've got any higher parts. Now, into Saturday night, the fog and the frost will widely reform, and so another very cold night. There'll be an increased risk of some showers feeding into southeast Scotland, perhaps a covering inland here, some significant snow over the hills, and certainly in the north and the west there continues to be that risk of icy patches as we start off Sunday. Some dense freezing fog patches, especially for southern and central parts of the UK. Most of these